All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, First off, today there won't be a briefing by Sharon Birch, the spokesperson for the President of the UN General Assembly, but she will brief tomorrow ahead of our noon briefing. And also tomorrow at 12:45 in this room, there will be a hybrid press briefing by Bob Ray, the President of the Economic and Social Council, and he will be here to brief in person to brief on Haiti and on the joint meeting of ECOSOC and the Peacebuilding Commission on Haiti. The Secretary General landed in Rome a short while ago after he concluded his program in Nice at the Ocean Conference. Tomorrow, Wednesday, he will be in Vatican City for an audience with His Holiness, Pope Leo XIV. The Secretary General looks forward to continuing the cooperation between the United Nations and the Holy See, notably on efforts to build a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world. And the Secretary General will return to New York later tomorrow. And earlier this morning, during a press event at the Ocean Conference, the Secretary General told journalists we are in Nice on a mission to save the ocean, to save our future. He warned that the ocean is approaching a tipping point, adding that powerful interests are pushing us towards the brink. We're facing a hard battle with a clear enemy, greed, Mr. Guterres told journalists. A greed that sows doubt, that denies science, that distorts truth, that rewards corruption, and destroys life for profit. He added, we are in Nice this week to stand in solidarity against those forces and reclaim what belongs to us all. The Secretary General said, we have a moral duty to ensure that future generations inherit oceans swarming with life, and he called for stronger global cooperation, for action on plastic pollution, and for the fight against climate change to extend to the seas. He also encouraged those countries that have yet to sign the agreement on marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction to do so without delay. With ratifications coming in at a record rate, the treaty's entry into force is now within sight. Before leaving Nice, the Secretary General also held bilateral meetings with Mohamed Al-Menfi, the head of the Presidential Council of Libya, and with Dr. Philippe Isidore Mpango, the Vice President of Tanzania. Turning to Gaza, our colleagues from the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that hostilities and hunger continue to fuel desperation among more than 2 million people who are being denied the basics necessary for their survival, amid reports of ongoing Israeli military operations. In northern Gaza, Israeli military operations have intensified in recent days, with mass casualties reported. Hungry and displaced people have also reportedly been killed while risking their lives to access food at militarized distribution hubs. Meanwhile, 4 new displacement orders have been issued by the Israeli authorities for northern areas of Gaza since the 6th of June. The last of these was said to be in response to reported Palestinian rocket fire into Israel. Combined, they cover about 8 square kilometers but largely overlap with previously issued orders. OCHA underscores that civilians must be protected, including those fleeing and forced to leave through displacement orders, and those who remain despite those orders. Civilians who flee must be allowed to return as soon as circumstances allow. OCHA reiterates that civilians must be able to receive the humanitarian assistance they need wherever they are. All of this is required by international humanitarian law. Yesterday, some supplies, mainly flour, were collected from the Kerem Shalom crossing. The aid was bound for Gaza City, but was taken directly from the trucks by hungry and desperate people who have now endured months of deprivation. As we have mentioned separately, there have also been some instances of violent looting and attacks on truck drivers, which are completely unacceptable. OCHA reiterates that Israel, as the occupying power, bears responsibility with regards to public order and safety in Gaza. That should include letting in far more essential supplies through multiple crossings and routes to meet humanitarian needs and help reduce looting. Today, additional supplies have been sent to Kerem Shalom, and humanitarian partners continue their efforts to pick up supplies when they are allowed access by the Israeli authorities. Meanwhile, Israeli authorities continue to deny many humanitarian movements within the Strip to provide whatever limited services are available to the population. Yesterday, they rejected 11 out of 18 attempts by the UN to coordinate such movements. These included trucking water, retrieving fuel, carrying out a rescue mission in Khan Yunis, and repairing roads. In the West Bank today, at around midnight, Israeli forces launched an operation in Nablus, focusing on the old city. They imposed a curfew, conducted house-to-house searches, and reportedly used a school as an interrogation center. At least 20 homes have been searched with reports of damage to property. Yesterday in Jenin, the Israeli authorities announced an imminent plan to demolish nearly 96 structures, most of them residential, in Jenin camp. Over 280 families who stand to be affected have been given 72 hours to retrieve their personal belongings. In Tulkarm, Israeli operations have intensified in the camps, in its camps, Tulkarm and Nur Shams, since the 6th of June, coinciding with Eid al-Adha. The forces have implemented demolition orders for 58 structures. More than 36 buildings have been demolished so far, according to the UN Relief and Works Agency, with destruction extending beyond the original orders issued at the start of the month. Julie Bishop, the Secretary General's Special Envoy for Myanmar, briefed the General Assembly this morning and said that fighting across Myanmar continues and that the humanitarian crisis impacting its people is far worse than when she briefed last October. There's been no end to the violence, let alone any significant pause in the conflict between the warring parties, and the scale of the conflict has escalated over the 4 years since the military takeover in February 2021, she said. And she warned that if there's no end to the violence, Myanmar is on a path to self-destruction. A zero-sum approach persists on all sides, Ms. Bishop said, adding that the flow of weapons into the country is fueling the expectations that a military solution is within reach. She reiterated the call from the UN Security Council, articulated in Resolution 2669, for the immediate release of all arbitrarily detained prisoners, including Win Myint and Aung San Suu Kyi. Regarding the recovery from the earthquake, she said that midway into 2025, the UN Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan, which covers the entire country, is less than 8% funded. Without urgent funding, the Special Envoy said, recovery efforts risk stalling, particularly as monsoon rains and floods heighten the risk of disease. This morning, the Security Council held an open briefing on the situation in Iraq. Mohammed al-Hassan, the head of the UN Assistance Mission in Iraq, known as UNAMI, who is here in person, spoke about the progress made in Iraq in preparing for the national parliamentary elections set for November. He said that UNAMI will provide the most professional technical support needed. With just over 6 months remaining before UNAMI's mandate ends, Mr. al-Hassan assured the council members that the mission continues to pursue a structured transition according to schedule and in close cooperation with the government of Iraq transition team. Turning to Sudan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is alarmed by intensifying violence in the greater Kordofan region and the growing humanitarian impact of the fighting there. Airstrikes have reportedly hit residential areas of Abyei city in North Kordofan state in recent days, injuring civilians. OCHA reports that conflict in the Kordofan region continues to hinder aid operations, leaving many people in need out of reach. Ongoing battles have brought the fighting closer to critical pastoral routes, which herders use to move their livestock. The humanitarian situation elsewhere in the country also remains dire. In northern state, partners report that nearly 6,000 people newly displaced from North Darfur, many of them older, wounded, or suffering from chronic diseases, arrived in Adaba locality during the last 2 weeks of May. They urgently needed health care, safe drinking water and protection services, including support for survivors of gender-based violence. In Khartoum state, cholera remains a threat, despite recent progress in the response by the UN, our partners, and local authorities. Over 1,300 new cases were recorded by health authorities there between May 26th and June 1st, down from 7,000 the previous week. While the fatality rate has declined, partners warned that underreporting may be masking the true scale of the outbreak. OCHA also reports that while displacement remains staggering, there's been a slight decline in the overall number of people uprooted by the conflict. Since December, about 1.2 million internally displaced people have returned to their areas of origin, a nearly 90% increase since April. The majority returned to Al Jazeera, followed by Sennar and Khartoum states. Basic services remain very limited in those areas, and returnees will require significant support. We once again call for an immediate cessation of hostilities, protection of civilians, and unimpeded humanitarian access across conflict lines and borders. In addition, greater national and international support is urgently required to scale up the response and meet rising needs across Sudan. Our peacekeeping colleagues from the UN mission Abyei, UNISFA, report that a joint women's committee of Ngok Dinka and Misriya women was launched this week in Todach, marking a key step towards inclusive peace and security in the region. The committee will promote women's participation in peace dialogue, conflict prevention, and reconciliation, while addressing security concerns and advocating for their empowerment. Turning to Ukraine, our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that according to local authorities, between June 5th and today, several civilians were killed and injured, including children, across urban centers and frontline areas of the country. Kiev, Kharkiv, Odessa, Ukraine's most populated cities, were particularly impacted. In the capital, Kiev, several first responders were reportedly killed and others wounded on duty while responding to earlier strikes. In Odessa, 3 health facilities, an emergency medical services station, a maternity hospital, and a blood center sustained damage, according to the World Health Organization. Since the escalation of the war in February 2022, WHO has verified 2,446 attacks on healthcare across the country. On June 6th, in Kherson region, local authorities report that a clearly marked Ukrainian Red Cross vehicle was destroyed in a strike. No personnel were injured. Meanwhile, in the west of the country, the regions of Rivne, Ternopil, and Volyn, previously less impacted by hostilities, also came under attack over the weekend. Civilians were injured and thousands were left without electricity following the attack. The humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Matthias Schmale, condemned the attacks, calling them a stark reminder of the terror Ukrainians across the country experience daily. In all affected localities, we, along with national and international humanitarian organizations, distributed emergency shelter materials, hot meals, and provided psychosocial support. Assistance continues amid intensifying violence. Turning to Haiti, our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs report that the country is entering the 2025 hurricane season with no emergency stockpile amid lack of funding. The World Food Program reports that for the first time ever, its teams have no pre-positioned food stocks in the country, nor the cash liquidity to mount a swift humanitarian response in the case of a hurricane or extreme weather event. In previous years, WFP could rapidly assist between 250,000 and 500,000 people in the immediate aftermath of a shock. The current lack of contingency stocks and operational funds leaves Haiti's most at-risk communities dangerously unprotected at a time of heightened vulnerability. The UN and partners have pre-positioned water, hygiene, and sanitation kits for over 100,000 people and health supplies for 20,000 people across the country. However, these items, while important, are not sufficient on their own to meet life-saving needs in an emergency, especially in the absence of food. Limited logistics capacity further compounds the risk of catastrophic delays in the critical first hours of any new emergency. The shortfall comes as Haiti faces a deepening humanitarian crisis. Armed violence has displaced over 1 million people and continues to severely disrupt access to basic services. Food insecurity remains widespread, with more than 5.7 million people, nearly half the population, facing acute hunger, including 2.1 million in IPC Phase 4 emergency levels. Haiti is one of only 5 countries worldwide with people facing famine-like conditions. The country's extreme vulnerability to natural disasters adds another layer to the crisis. OCHA stresses that humanitarians remain committed to supporting affected communities. Alongside national authorities that continue to deliver food, clean water, healthcare, hygiene kits, shelter, and psychosocial support, despite insecurity and severe underfunding. OCHA calls on international partners to act urgently to fill these critical gaps and help ensure a timely and effective response as the hurricane season unfolds. And the $908 million humanitarian needs and response plan for Haiti is currently just over 8% funded, with $75 million received. In a statement we issued last night, the Secretary General strongly condemned the attempt on the life of Miguel Uribe Turbay, the Colombian presidential pre-candidate, in Bogota on the 7th of June. The Secretary General hopes for Mr. Uribe Turbay's full recovery and expresses his solidarity with his family and the Colombian people. This deplorable act of political violence must be fully investigated and those responsible brought to justice. The coming elections present an opportunity for Colombians to further strengthen their democracy through a peaceful electoral process. The UN Development Coordination Office tells us that on the 8th of June, Laura Melo of Portugal took up her new post as UN Resident Coordinator in Ecuador. Her appointment follows the host government's approval. She brings more than 20 years of experience in development and humanitarian work, with a focus on supporting the most vulnerable. She most recently led WFP's operations in Venezuela, after holding similar roles in Guatemala and Cuba. Ms. Melo's full biography is available online. The UN Population Fund today released a report showing that millions of people are unable to have the number of children they want, but not because they are rejecting parenthood. According to UNFPA, economic and social barriers are stopping them. The report finds that 1 in 5 people globally don't expect to have the number of children they desire. Key drivers include the prohibitive cost of parenthood, job insecurity, housing, concerns over the state of the world, and the lack of a suitable partner. UNFPA notes that a toxic blend of economic precarity and sexism play a role in many of these issues. The full report is available online. And last, today is the International Day for Dialogue Among Civilizations. In his message, the Secretary General says that on this first International Day for Dialogue Among Civilizations, we celebrate the rich diversity of civilizations as a force to promote mutual understanding and global solidarity. That's it for me. Deji?
Yes. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, yesterday, during an interview, made a statement suggesting that a Muslim country in Middle East should offer its own territory to establish a Palestinian state, rather than in that area. So, is that considered also a two-state solution?
I would just reiterate that there are a number of UN resolutions, particularly of the Security Council, but also of the General Assembly on this issue. And I would refer you to resolutions 242, 338, and their successors. And we expect the two-state solution to be something that is negotiated by the Israeli and Palestinian people.
But should Jerusalem be the capital city of both Palestine, state of Palestine, and Israel?
We have made
side by
clear.
side?
We have made clear in
Then why you don't want to say that?
We have made clear in our past statements that we expect Jerusalem to be the capital
so
of both.
that is not two-state solution from the UN's perspective view.
I'm not prejudging any proposals. What I'm saying is that we have clearly stated what our expectations are of the process, as has the Security Council, as has the General Assembly.
Right. Next, I don't know whether the Secretary General office have any comment on the what reported a massive injury and deaths during the aid delivery in U.S.-backed Gaza humanitarian fund delivery point.
Well, obviously, every day we're aware of reports of the deaths of people who are trying to receive aid. As we've said repeatedly in recent days, no one should have to choose between feeding their family and risking their own lives. We want there to be safe conditions for people to receive aid. We have already established our track record over the years, and including just earlier this year, of being able to deliver aid safely.
The leader of UNRWA, Filippo Lazzarini, in his X said that it's another day of aid distribution, another day of death traps. Does the Secretary General share the same sentiment with Lazzarini?
We believe that right now, conditions at the non-UN run aid distribution sites are unsafe, and you've seen for yourself how unsafe that is. That cannot be how people are expected to receive humanitarian aid.
I'm curious. Have your colleagues told you about their feeling about this Gaza humanitarian fund operations? Is that unprofessional of the Gaza humanitarian fund? Do you think they're unprofessional?
We have made clear what our concerns are. Again, the basic point of humanitarian aid distribution is that people who are in need should be able to safely access the aid that they need. That is not happening under these circumstances. Gabriel, and then Yvonne.
Thanks, Farhan. Israel is still holding several of the activists from the aid ship that they seized illegally in international waters. Does the Secretary General feel that they should be released, the people that they're still holding, immediately?
Again, we believe that that the right of people to engage in peaceful protest should not be hindered. We want to make sure that no harm comes to those who participated in this activity.
Do you have any reason to believe they committed any crime whatsoever?
I'm not aware what the charges against them would be, but from our standpoint, this was an act of peaceful protest. Yes, Yvonne, and then Volodymyr.
Thanks, Farhan. The UN operations, humanitarian operations that were prevented from going ahead by the Israeli military yesterday. I think you said there were 8 of them. Did I get that figure right? So 8 were prevented going ahead. Do you have a figure on the number that were able to? And secondly, what was the reason given for preventing those operations being carried out?
What I said is that we had 18 attempts to coordinate humanitarian movements. Yesterday, 11 of them were rejected. So 7, in other words, were not. But obviously, there are different reasons given, but many of them have to do with insecurity. But like I said, these are some of the crucial activities that we're trying to do involving the distribution of aid throughout parts of Gaza. Volodymyr.
Thank you, Farhan. We see that Putin's Russia continues to direct its strikes against carefully selected civilian targets, against maternity hospitals, as seen today in Odessa, as mentioned, against Ukrainian historical landmarks, as seen today in Kyiv, with the damage of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, St. Sophia Cathedral, and against museums, as a few days ago, the Museum of the Second World War in Kyiv was shelled. Could you comment on this military activity by Moscow?
Well, I mean, as we made clear just earlier in this briefing, obviously there have been many different attacks on health facilities. The World Health Organization has recorded almost 2,500 such attacks since February of 2022. And that's a very serious set of infractions because health facilities are supposed to be spared. And similarly, we've expressed our concerns, including through UNESCO, about the need to protect World Heritage Sites. All of those should be off limits from these sorts of attacks. Abdulhamid, and then after that you. Abdulhamid first.
Thank you, Farhan. A report issued by the independent investigation team, which was established by the Human Rights Council in 2021, came up to the conclusion that attacking the cultural system, the educational system, the health system in Gaza is a part of a large campaign against the Palestinian people, and it could be classified as war crimes and the crime of genocide. Does the SG stand with that finding of the independent team of investigation?
Independent team, and we believe it should be evaluated fairly by the members of the Human Rights Council to whom the report was presented.
My second question, Farhan. I have read your statement about the flotilla Madeleine, and you said we are observing, but I noticed you did not criticize the Israeli behavior. You did not condemn it. You did not express concern. You just said we are observing what's going on. Do you see that Israel had not violated international law and the law of the sea?
I would just refer you back to what I said yesterday, which I think expressed what our concerns were. Yes, please.
Yes, please. Thank you, Farhan. It's good?
Yep.
The two-state solution summit will take place next week as per the request of the General Assembly. What does the SG expect from it, and also what role will it take at the summit?
We will clarify the Secretary General's report role in this closer to the event, but I do expect him to be present and to speak at that, and you'll be able to hear his views about that summit at that point. But certainly, the Secretary General has made clear, including in his recent remarks, that the two-state solution has been on life support in recent years, and he certainly hopes that next week's events will help re-energize this process. Yes, Evelyn.
Thank you, Farhan. A couple of questions that maybe they're just hopeful things, but has the UN spoken to the Russians about why civilians seem to be the main target?
We have called on Russia and Ukraine to spare civilians in their activities, and we'll continue to do that.
Secondly, on the two-state solution, Netanyahu does have opposition, and they possibly could win. The point is whether the opposition comes to the right or the left. None of the leading candidates for his job have in any way backed the two-state solution. Has the UN spoken to some of the Israelis who are not necessarily speaking to the UN, or just to see what the two-state solution might look like without Netanyahu?
I don't want to speculate on what the future holds, but we expect both Israel and Palestine and all of the officials in those two entities to negotiate in good faith on a two-state solution. And with that, I wish you all a good afternoon.